You and Your Systematic Review, Part 1, Create Your Question and Search. CDU acknowledges and pays respect to elders past and present of the Larrakia people where the main Darwin campus is located, along with our other campuses on lands across Australia. In this course, we'll focus on two separate parts. Part 1 is developing a question and systematic searching. Part 2, and a separate recording, will cover screening using Prisma and EndNote and appraisal tools. So, what is a systematic review? A systematic review is a way to provide comprehensive and unbiased synthesis of the relevant studies. It's contained in a single document using rigorous and transparent methods. A systematic review aims to gather all the information on a topic, and it attempts to uncover all the evidence in relation to a question. To summarise, a systematic review will have a specific question to answer, and then it will use a method that's rigorous and transparent, so other researchers can replicate the exact same search. A systematic review is generally used in clinical research. However, it's expanded to be quite broad, including to social sciences, and today it's used in many different subjects. An example of one of the very first systematic reviews is by James Lind from 1753. They aim to provide a concise and unbiased summary of evidence on scurvy. If you are new to using systematic reviews as a type of method, then check out this article on the ABC of systematic literature reviews. For example, this paper highlights some of the main features of a systematic literature review. They include developing a review protocol that can then be replicated and followed. It has a formulated research question that is very specific and narrow, has systematic searching strategies, has a quality appraisal process, has data extraction, data synthesis, and data demonstration. Another useful source to guide you through the systematic literature review is this free online book, Introduction to Scoping and Systematic Reviews. This recent publication is really useful because it will show you the difference between a scoping review and a systematic review that have different methods. It also takes you through step by step in detail, more detail than this workshop, to each of the different steps, including screening, extracting, appraising, and more. Let's have a look at some of the features of a systematic review. One feature is a systematic review will usually have multiple authors. There can be complex papers to publish, and to eliminate bias, there will be one or more reviewers that will be involved in selecting the literature against a criteria. If you have less than one author for a paper, then it's more likely to come under a different type of review. For example, scoping review or an umbrella review. Systematic, large pieces of work often have multiple authors. It will then have a method and framework identified. For example, how they undertook the search, what databases, what date, and what model they used to scrutinise those results. It will then have a results section, including how many papers were reviewed, how many were eliminated as duplicate in those results, and then how many studies were assessed and included in the final review. It will also have a conclusion that will summarise what the paper found. So what did the literature say? One tip if you're starting a literature review in a specific subject area is to read a systematic review in your discipline. See how they describe their methods, the process, and what they did. Sometimes there's differences in the different disciplines to how the systematic review is undertaken, so you can search Library Search or Google Scholar to find systematic reviews related to your topic. So now we know systematic reviews have a complex methodology. They have a specific way of being set out. Thinking about what type of review is good for your research topic is to think about your workload, skill level, the amount of people involved, time, and the purpose of your review. Cornell University Library has this fantastic flow chart that you can work through and think of what type of review you need to use. Is it a systematic review, or do you need another type of review? For example, do you want to gather all the evidence on a particular research topic? If the answer is no, it's more likely to be a literature or narrative review. If the answer is yes, do you have 3 or more people to review your work? If the answer is no, then more intensive work usually requires a multi-person team. If the answer is yes, do you have 12 to 18 months to complete the review? If the answer is no, then that's more suitable to a rapid review. If the answer is yes, then think about the broadness of your research question. If it's a very broad question, then it's more suitable to a scoping review. If you want to include other published systematic reviews, maybe similar to an umbrella review, but if you have a well-formed research question that fits a very narrow topic, then you may like to select a systematic review. A systematic review, multi-authors, takes time to publish, and it must have a very specific research question. If you want to use statistical methods to objectively evaluate, synthesize, and summarize your results, then you may be interested in a meta-analysis. Before starting your systematic review, think about which method will work for your question. Before you start a systematic review, have a look at the different options of reviews. Is the systematic review the one you want, or will one of the other types of review work better? There's a useful paper on this topic by Grant and Booth, and they examine a typology of review. So they look at 14 different reviews and their associated methodologies, and this may help you choose. They start with questions such as, what is the problem you want to solve? Do you have a team? And do you want to publish this paper? Let's recap on what we've covered so far. A systematic literature review has multiple different steps that need to be completed. First, you need to develop a research question that can be answered with a systematic review. Then, you need to develop a comprehensive, objective, and reproducible search strategy. So say, for example, you give your search strategy to another researcher, they should be able to follow that strategy to produce results. You need to identify key databases. Often multiple databases are selected in a systematic review, and you need to screen results, extract data to meet their inclusion criteria. Next, we're going to look at developing a question that's suitable for a systematic literature review. We will look at several frameworks that can be used to help guide the formulation of your question. But if you're not quite sure yet what your question is, or if it's suitable to a systematic review, think about what study design answers your question. Is it qualitative or quantitative? And do a scoping search first. The more you know about your topic, the easier it is to understand whether your research question is capable of being narrow enough for a systematic review. There are several frameworks that can help you develop an answerable question. It will help you decide the scope of your research, and that can be answered within the systematic review. It will help you locate relevant research and identify gaps in the research. There are many different frameworks to choose from, including PICO or PECO. There's the PICO with a small o, Eclipse, Spider, and SPICE. We see some of these frameworks used more often in discipline areas such as PICO and CLIP with clinical questions, and we'll also see examples of Spider and SPICE in more social science and business topics. If you're not quite sure which frameworks are popular in your discipline area, do a scoping review and see which frameworks appear. Let's look at some of the frameworks together. The first one is Spider. Spider is a framework that's useful for qualitative research questions, and it's more about the experience of something. So if you have patients or clients or people, the question is, what are their experiences of? For example, what are the experiences of developing a sustainable business plan? Spider is a mnemonic system where each letter spells out one element of the question. For example, S stands for sample. This is the group of participants in a qualitative research question. For example, businesses that have a sustainability plan. That could include businesses or people that have developed a sustainability plan. PI is phenomenon of interests, how and why the behaviours and the experiences. For example, behaviour is the plan development. D is for design, how the study was devised and run. E is for evaluation, so the measurement of the outcome, and it might be subjective, so not necessarily qualitative, it might be some quantitative in there. And research type, so they're going to be qualitative or quantitative, or mixed. So an example of a SPIDER question would be, what are the experiences of businesses developing a sustainability plan? PICO is commonly used for clinical questions, where you compare one intervention or no intervention. For example, in women, is Panadol or ibuprofen more effective for relieving headache? PICO is also mnemonic, so P stands for patient, population or problem. So how would you describe a group of patients? What is the most important characteristic? I is for intervention or prognostic factors or exposure. So what is the main intervention or factor that you're considering? And what do you want to do for the patient? So what is the main intervention that you're considering? C is for comparison. What's the main alternative to compare with the intervention? So Panadol versus ibuprofen. And the outcome is the relief of headache. There are variations on PICO. For example, you could use PICO for quantitative studies, or you can also use PICO with a small o for qualitative studies. This is where you may look at the context, for example, a setting or a specific characteristic. Here is an example of creating a question using PICO to create a question that's capable of being answered by systematic review. A diagnosis question is something that addresses an act or a process, or identifies the nature or cause of a disease or injury through evaluation. For example, we have middle-aged men with suspected myocardial infarction are serial 12-lead ECGs compared to one initial 12-lead ECG more accurate in diagnosing an acute myocardial infarction. To formulate a question, we can structure it first by using the first intervention. The first intervention is the 12-lead ECGs. So we could say, are serial 12-lead ECGs more accurate in diagnosing the population, which is middle-aged men with suspected myocardial infarction, compared with, that's the comparison, of one initial 12-lead ECG, and the outcome is more accurate diagnosis of acute myocardial infarction. Another way of structuring the question would be saying, in middle-aged men with suspected myocardial infarction, are serial 12-lead ECGs compared with one initial 12-lead ECG more accurate in diagnosing acute myocardial infarction? So we can see with this type of question, it's fairly short. There are two measurements that are being compared with one population. Here's another example of using questions on prevention. A prevention question is about reducing the chances of diseases or identifying and modifying a risk factor, and how to diagnose a disease by early screening. The question is, in operating room nurses doing a 5-minute scrub, what are the differences in the presence and types of microbes found under natural polished nails and nail beds compared to artificial nails? For this question, we can see here, sometimes PICO is put in order, otherwise we can change the order of appearance. We could structure the question, for OR nurses doing a 5-minute scrub, does the use of artificial nails reduce the future risk of presence and type of microbes compared with nurses that have natural polished nails and nail beds? There are many different ways to structure your question, so do have a look at the literature, think about the structure and how to place your question. Let's do one together. Let's think about a topic and create an answerable question using Pico. Let's look at this question. You can follow the same process for your research question. For this example, we're going to look at how does the use of exercise compared to medication and treating depression in middle-aged women. We need to break it down into P, what is the population, I, what is the intervention, C is the comparison, and O is the outcome. The population is going to be middle-aged women. The intervention is exercise, the comparison is medication, and O is the treatment of depression. Next, try this for your question. Does your question fit into Pico, or does another framework help you create an answerable question? Pause the video here to try placing your systematic review question into a framework. Try Pico or Spider. Next, let's move on to search strategies. A search strategy is important for a systematic review because it must be reproducible. Some of the features of a search strategy for a systematic review is that they usually appear in the appendix of your systematic review protocol. The protocol is the document you use explaining how you would do the systematic review. So when you searched, it usually includes the date that you searched, the databases you selected, and how each of the databases were searched. For example, what keywords do you use, Boolean connectors, fields, the steps you took in the search, and the end number of results. Each database may have a different strategy, so you need to document that in your protocol, explaining which database you searched, when, how you did it, and how many results you got. Let's move on to looking at keywords or search terms that can help you build your search strategy. Keywords are the terms and phrases you use to describe the main topic. When you enter keywords into the search box, it will search across the fields that you ask it to. Using the right keywords can really help you find the most relevant sources related to your search and can help you narrow down the results you get for a systematic review. So how do you find the right keywords for your topic? You can do this by reading the literature. What words do they use? If you see another similar systematic review, think about what keywords they use, what databases they use. Do they use tools like EBSCO or MESH, or something else in your area? You can also use special tools such as EBSCO and MESH to select keywords in your area, and we'll go into that in more detail next. In selecting and preparing for your search strategy, you may like to create a search strategy grid or a map explaining what are the key words for your area, and then look for synonyms or similar words that can broaden or narrow your search. Next is to think about Boolean. Boolean can help narrow or broaden your search depending on how you connect your keywords. If you use the word and, it connects both terms together. For example, First Nations and health will look for articles that will have both of these terms. Use the word or to search for either term. For example, First Nations or Aboriginal Australians. Use the word not to only search for one term. For example, forestry, not farming. To build a more complex search, use exact terms, truncation, and wildcards. These three things can be used to narrow or broaden your search as needed. Common ones used in systematic reviews including double quotation marks or phrase searching. This returns the exact result if you put two or more keywords together. For example, if you type the word common cold into a search engine, this will search for both words. It will search for both the word common and for the word cold. If you use quotation marks around the phrase, it will look for the phrase common cold. You can use the asterisk to search for a variation on the root of the word or variations on the ending of the word. For example, if you search for the word math with an asterisk, it could return math maths, mathematics, or mathematicians. If you use a question mark, it can replace one character in the word, and this is great for different spellings. For example, the different regional spellings of polarization. On the Finding Sources guide, you'll see the database searching techniques in more detail. This will break down for you the different databases and the different Boolean connectors. It'll explain to you which connectors are used, are they uppercase or lowercase. It'll also use phrase searching, truncation, wildcards, proximity searches, so that's searching within a range of words, and field codes. For example, only searching a title or an abstract. When developing your search strategy, use a pilot test. When building your search strategy, document which keywords bring back the results that are relevant to your topic. One way to test out your search strategy is to create a pilot test. A pilot test of your strategy is to look at the first 5 results that you get. Do they match your topic, and do they help you answer your research question? In the pilot test, use your inclusion criteria for your systematic review. Do any of the results match what you'd expect to use in your systematic review? Another test you can use is the key article test. Choose one article relevant to your research question. When you search to the database, does it appear? Using your chosen keywords, this will help you show if you're getting the results you need. For example, if the important articles are being missed in your search strategy, then you may need to reevaluate how you are searching. Next, let's have a look at creating a search strategy using a systematic review question. We have our PICO question from earlier, middle-aged women with depression, exercise, medication, and reducing depression or no depression. Then we can create our keyword map. For middle-aged women, we could use middle-age or female, or people between the ages of 40 and 60 years of age. With depression, we could also use mental illness or mental health. For exercise, we could use monitoring or physical activity. For medication, we could look at treatment methods or antidepressants or another medication. And then for the outcome, reduced depression or no depression, we'd use decline in mental health systems, recovery, improvement mental health. Anti-intuitively, sometimes adding too many synonyms to your search string will reduce the quality of your search results. So sometimes you do need to look at the total number. So sometimes you do need to reevaluate. Sometimes adding more synonyms doesn't actually help your search. Next, let's try our synonyms in a live search. You can go to the library home site by going to Google, CDU Library, or follow cdu.edu.au/library. On the library home page, underneath the main search box, select Databases. To find the right database on your topic, you can search alphabetically, or you can limit your results by subject area. For this topic, I'm going to choose the database Medline, so I select M for Medline, and then select Medline Complete. In Medline Complete, select Advanced Search, and this will help build the fields for your search. To start searching, I'm going to start with my first topic area, the patient population. I'm going to start with my first topic, middle age. As I start to type into this database, it does start to suggest keywords or key terms. This can really help you pick out your keywords, and this one will help me pick out middle-aged adults or 45 to 64 years, or I can add midlife or middle adulthood. In the next search bar, I can connect it with the word and type in women or female or woman or females, and depression or depressive disorders or depressive symptoms or major depressive disorder. To add a row, click on Add Row, Exercise, or Physical Fitness or Physical Activity. Then my next row, Treatment, or Intervention or Therapy or Management or Rehabilitation. Next to each row, you'll see all fields selected. To narrow results for any of these keywords, you can limit your search just to title abstract or just abstract. I'm going to leave this very broad at all fields. Underneath, you've got your filters. Just remember, for systematic review protocols, often you're not limiting to English language or full text or peer review. You're searching everything, unless you specify that in your systematic search protocol and in your inclusion-exclusion criteria. Then back to the search and select search. Then in my search results, I can see I have 154 results. Now let's compare these results and searching style with another database. Back on the database page, I'm going to select S for Scopus. Then select Scopus. Inside Scopus, there are different options to search. You can add your search string or build a search. Let's look at both options. For searching documents, I can enter a search string straight into the main search there. So, middle age, and here I'm going to be using my Boolean connectors and my wildcards. So I'm going to be searching middle age, or aged, or 44 to 60 years, and you can change this depending on your criteria. So this truncation will search for woman or women. You can see here I'm using brackets to build my search and contain my search terms. Then select search. In Scopus, I get far more results and get 9,521 documents. Going back to the main search box. From here, you can also build your search by connecting different search terms here and building and changing your search. To identify the best databases for your topic, have a look at the subject guides or the database list. Some databases are multidisciplinary, and some are very specific to the discipline. Health examples include Medline, CINAHL, and PubMed. Think about what papers you're going to include, such as peer-reviewed, academic quality, journals, reports, conference papers, or grey literature. The access and availability request or purchasing. For example, are you able to get access to those results? Think about grey literature or industry documents. And then, if you need to use grey literature, other tools like Trove, Google Scholar, ProQuest. Make sure that your searches are robust and replicable. Can you give it to someone else to test out your search? Keep the detailed records of your searches, including date. Did you need to change your keywords or the way you searched? Save your searches in the database so you can go back and find those searches and replicate them again. And if needed, change or add your search terms and make sure you update your inclusion and exclusion criteria and rerun the search. If you're undertaking a health research topic, you can also use Medline to test out your search. In Medline, you can select Mesh. This is where you can look and see if your search terms have been indexed in Mesh. That's the medical index there that will help you pick out the right keywords for your topic. It's also got a PICOT form, so where you can test out your PICO answer or variation of that to see what results you can get. Furthermore, on Mesh, if you type in, for example, a term such as health costs, it will give you a limiter that you can then use in searching many of the health databases. For example, if you select health costs and add to search, it will add that as a specific Mesh term, which can further narrow your results. Another useful tool for medical research or health research is PubMed. It also has a Pico tool where you can test out your search results. PubMed also has a mesh integration. You can just use the square brackets with mesh in if it's a mesh term, and you can add that directly to your search from the mesh integration in PubMed. Some other further considerations as you prepare for your systematic review. Consider your sources and subjects. Do you need to use grey literature, or are you looking only at academic literature? The next step, once you have your research question and you have done some initial searches with testing out your search strategy, is to run some test searches. Choose your database. Can you find some relevant results for your topic? Remember to keep a record of your searches. That's a part of the methodology. Have a look at the literature review guide. There's a search history template, and this will help you keep your changes over time, including your login details to the databases, keywords, and how many results, and if they're changing. There is an option to register your protocol. A protocol can be useful as it will have the description of the process of the review. It will also help you reduce research bias, avoid duplication of research, and to provide transparency. Two different options for registration is through Prospero. This is an international database, and most of the reviews here are going to be health or social care. For non-medical sciences, you can register your protocol with Open Science Framework. If you do need assistance from the librarians can assist you with developing your protocol, including suggesting databases, helping you pick out your keywords, key terms, and database searching. Check out the Systematic Review Guide for further information on systematic reviews. And if you have any questions, explore the CDU Library website that gives you access to the databases. Sign up to attend a workshop including part 2 of your systematic reviews. You can book an appointment with a librarian or browse the workshop recordings. If you have any questions, please email the library at askthelibrary@cdu.edu.au, phone, text, or check out the FAQs on the website. Thank you.